Hello and welcome back to Read Becca for my weekly chatty catch up on everything I have been reading, everything I'm looking forward to reading, and everything I've finished reading in the past week. So I have a ton I want to talk about, so I'm kind of going to launch in here, but I mostly don't want to talk about books directly. It's very hard to know what to discuss about current events on BookTube because you can kind of get stuck in a loop of always discussing the current event, and there's just so much going on that you can't address it all really. But there are several things that have gone on in the past week or have been going around in the BookTube community in the past week that I think all sort of interconnect loosely, or I'm going to try to interconnect them, and I just wanted to chat about those briefly. So quickly into the books that I finished. The first book I finished is Sun Tzu in Space, How International Relations, History, and Science Fiction Can Teach Us About the Future by Gregory D. Miller, I believe. And this is actually out in April. So this was an advanced copy that I requested from the Naval Institute Press. This is obviously nonfiction. It, I assume, is probably intended to be a course book for some sort of political science course, and I enjoyed it very much. I will do a standalone review, so I'm not going to get into too much detail here, and I will post that up around when it's coming out in April. So this book is very, very novel, and this is a course I would like to take if it were available to me, because each chapter is looking at a different international relations theory or a different power dynamic in terms of nations or different world powers interacting in space at different power levels. So what happens if you have a single world power that's very dominant over the rest of the nations in the world and they're interacting in space? What happens if you have two powers and then a lesser power is rising and gains equal or even greater power in space? What happens, my favorite chapter was about corporations, and so it discusses the idea of, well, you have multinational or international corporations, and private businesses, go to space first, set up the norms in space. How does that interact with nations that then enter space? And the relationships between those multinational corporations back on Earth with the nations they're operating in. So I found that really, really interesting, that it's taking all these sort of different power dynamics and how they would play out. Every chapter, though, is separated out into a scenario. This is a purely envisioned scenario, and it's the author starting from around 2030, so it's purely future, but telling it as if it's looking back on everything that's happened over a vast amount of time based on these ideas of these power dynamics playing out in space. So it may be hundreds of years. And so we watch what happens with civilization over these power dynamics. So he plays through these scenarios in a very on rails format that we don't see a lot of what could happen if something goes wrong and something goes right. We don't get the pessimistic and optimistic options. We just get one straight through scenario. And then he comes back into the chapter and explains sort of what is the international relations theory that he's looking at. Here's some historical examples. And then plays through things in sci-fi that have actually shown that scenario, stories where that's played out and why and how. So I think that's a great, great format. I really enjoyed reading it overall. I do think it was a bit academic. There weren't any parts that I struggled with other than it just being dry in parts, but it was an enjoyable read, and I could see a lot of especially hard sci-fi readers who are very into strategy and politics in their sci-fi would really enjoy this. So overall, great, great book. I'm very glad that I requested a copy. Then I read Woman World by Aminder Dhaliwal. You may recall I read Cyclopedia Exotica from this artist 2 weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it, so I went back to my library and picked this one up. This is an earlier comic collection, and I think that shows here. It's a little more simplistic in terms of the storytelling. These are mostly 1 to 2 page panels, and I do think it has the same insightfulness. It's just not as nuanced and layered as Encyclopedia Exotica was. So this one, we are following a world where at the very beginning, we're getting a setup of men are dying off, and the researcher is imploring everyone to do research into why it's happening. And we see all of the researchers saying, we need to research it, we need to find out what's happening, and all the politicians and whatnot coming back and say, well, we have other priorities, money, defense, all of that. We need to prioritize those things instead. And so as things are getting more dire, this researcher is looking into how to initiate female-only reproduction. And everyone strikes against that because it's sexist, right? So they can't get anything done. So eventually we do. Most of the comic is taking place in this established world of just women, basically. There have not been any men in the world for a while. We're following 3 generations, more or less, adult women, elderly women, and young girls. And so they're all at different stages of understanding that. The elderly women do remember men. The adult women have never met men. And the young girls have really no idea even what a man is. And so you can tell the generational change over time from this. But these are really quick, mostly gags, honestly, with a little bit of insight to them. And so I don't think it had the depth that I got out of Cyclopedia Exotica, but I did really enjoy it. I think there was so much there in the diversity of the characters. Like I got across with the different generations, we also have characters of just all different lifestyles. We have women who are disabled, we have trans women, and getting across the ways that they have relationships with each other comes through here. Their different sort of power dynamics is wonderful. And so I think that's gotten across, that even though men are not around, things don't substantially change. And in this story, it's also sort of post-climate disaster. So they are in the process of trying to rebuild a society and struggling with that. There aren't any really, I don't think, deep or heavy themes in here, but those insights do kind of tack on some things that we could really have thought provoked about how we react going forward to things like this, about, you know, gender inequality and climate crisis and what we are doing with society. So I did enjoy it very much, not quite as much as Cyclopedia Exotica. Then we've got the stuff that I am in progress on and have not finished. I'm mainly chipping away at a lot of things, so I think we're going to have a avalanche of finishing things very soon. I'm still working on Tales from Gavagans Bar. I am still working on Bliss Montage, and I am still working on The Best of World SF. All of those are short stories, more or less, so I'm kind of chipping away, as I said. And then the actual books that I'm working on, I have River of Gods, very shiny library copy, and this one I will probably finish this week. I actually did already do my March TBR and didn't mention, this is my bestseller for the month of February. So I do think I will finish it in the next week, but I don't want to pick up my March bestseller because one of my goals is to do bestsellers every month. I don't want to pick that up till I'm finished with this and return some other stuff, a number of things, to the library. So I didn't put a bestseller on my March TBR, but I do have plans to go pick one up, definitely. So once I'm finished with that one, I need to get to work on Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I did lose the audio, but I'm at 60%, which is, I think, more than I expected to finish up through the audio. So now I've got the print, and I need to make some progress on that one before I can get to the sequel. So that is everything that I read this week. I have been watching a ton of TV. I don't have much to talk about because I haven't really been finishing a lot of TV, because I've just been round robining between trashy reality competitions mostly. I did finish Great British Bake Off The Professionals season 6, and that's the first season I think that has been available in the US of the Professionals version. So obviously you in the UK have all these wonderful different Bake Off or the Great British whatever things in series, and we don't have them as much in the US, and I wish we did. But it was very, very good. I really enjoyed it. All of the joys of Bake Off that we all enjoy. Other than that, Next Level Chef just started. I had finished Hell's Kitchen, which is another Gordon Ramsay series. Next Level Chef is his newest series, and it's on the 2nd season. I really love the premise of it. It's three levels, so literal to the title, where each of them is from top down, best to worst in terms of the equipment quality, and they kind of have to compete to figure out which level they're going to be on and get the best or worst equipment. And their premise is basically a excellent next level chef will be able to cook awesome stuff in any of the levels with any equipment. And it's a really fun show. And I love that the 3 chefs that are on the show, one for each level, are genuinely doing like mentorship for the people that are there cooking and really helping them out and overseeing them as they go. So yeah, I really like that show. I'm also watching a ton of, as I said, trashy reality TV dating shows, and I've been really enjoying that. It's been a great respite from all the stress of the world and my life this week. And I've been having some great Voxer conversations about that. So I've been watching Perfect Match, and every time I'm caught up on that, I've been jumping into Love Island, which I had already sort of mentioned. I'm watching both season 1 and season 9 alternately. And it's been weird because I've never really watched one of these shows start to finish. I think I've dipped in and out of like The Bachelor, that sort of thing in the past, and they're very trashy, but like it really pulls you in and you get very invested. And so I've been enjoying that aspect of really enjoying it. It is quite funny because for the first time after watching all this, I am suddenly being inundated with dating app ads. But none of them are useful to me. So I'm getting, and wedding app ads as well, weirdly. But the dating apps that I'm getting ads for are Black singles, senior singles, and parents who are singles. None of which I have an interest in joining. Not that I have an interest in joining a dating app, but I'm just like constantly bombarded with that now. So that is always funny to me, the marketing stuff that you get with all of that. So my watching stuff has not been very productive at all, but it has really been a stress reliever because I did have a quite stressful week. Not anything major. It's mostly self-imposed stress. I think it was Wednesday. I went out to start my car just to run to the store on lunch, and my car wouldn't start. And so I'm sure it was that my battery's dead. Like not a big deal. And I live and have many neighbors next to me that I could ask. Not a huge deal, but I had been intending to buy a portable jump starter just for exactly this scenario. And so being, a person who doesn't have a need to go out constantly, I was like, oh, I can wait. I'll do same day order and just get a portable jump starter delivered, and we'll take care of it. And then I'll find out if my battery's completely dead and will not start at all, and I need to get it towed, etc. Or if I can actually jump it and get it to the shop. Or if I've let my battery die. That was entirely possible as well, because I think I only drove maybe 5 or 6 miles in probably the past 2 weeks, because my Pathfinder D&D type game is like my one reliable long drive, and it's been canceled the past couple weeks. So I was definitely thinking it was a possibility that I just didn't drive enough and my battery died. So anyway, so I did this order for the same day delivery in the evening, in the 5 to 10 p.m. range. I see it go out for delivery, and I see that the stops are counting up, and I'm the next stop. And then it's one road over, and suddenly it starts getting farther and farther away. And we're like halfway through the delivery window. It stops at presumably, I'm assuming, the warehouse, and I'm remaining as you're the next stop. And then the map goes offline. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. They're probably on lunch, whatever. And the time is creeping by and it's not coming back on. And it's still saying it's going to be delivered by 10 p.m. It was not delivered by 10 p.m. So I was like, okay, no big deal. Now they're updating it as it's going to be delivered tomorrow. And I'm waiting, and it's not going back out for delivery. And it's still saying it's going to be delivered within the next window, and we're halfway through the window and it's not going out for delivery. So finally it ended up being like me stressing about this whole plan that I had concocted of, okay, I'm going to get it today, and then if it is really dead, I'm going to get it towed. If it's not really dead, then I'm going to be able to get it into the shop and get it replaced, whatever. Like, I had made this whole plan for how this had to play out and was stressing myself out for no reason. I didn't have anywhere I had to go. Just because I had concocted a plan. And so this was all feigned stress. I did wind up just actually placing another order for an overnight delivery, and obviously the one that that never showed up was just lost. And so I canceled that one after the overnight delivery came in. So from Wednesday to Friday morning, I wasn't able to go anywhere and was just like looping on stress about this stupid plan that I had concocted out of nothing. So everything is fine. I got my portable jump starter and was able to jumpstart things, and I do need a new battery, so I'm going to do that this week. But until then, I have my portable jump starter now, and it's very handy dandy and very easy to use. So that has made my life easier in the end after a lot of waiting. And ridiculously, I could have just walked to AutoZone, but it would have been $30 more and a mile each way to just do that and get a portable jump starter to do that. Very, very silly. So that was a whole ramble now. This is going to be a really long video. I apologize. But obviously, if you were only interested in the bookish stuff, you can skip all that. So after that ramble, let's dive into the current events discussion. So first current event to discuss is Tennessee's drag bill. Now, this is all sort of ridiculous. I don't want to overreact or underreact to what's going on, because ultimately it is intended to be an attack on LGBTQ and drag performers, and it's sort of that. As far as everything that I have seen, I haven't done a ton of research, but from all of the looking that I've done, it's very vague, which is a problem. The bill, I believe, has passed the Senate, went to the House. The House proposed something slightly different, and now it's back to the Senate to approve, basically, but it's more or less passed. As I said, these are clear attacks on freedoms that we should have, but the reason why I don't want to overreact is that, based on the text that we've seen out of the Tennessee Senate, this basically is something that is already covered by obscenity laws. It's not, it is overly vague, so it could be interpreted different ways. But it's something that already, you can't have a strip show just in public, right? There are reasons that strip clubs have like special zoning, and they have to go through certain legal processes in order to operate. And that's just typical, right? Should we have those? I don't know. That's a bigger conversation. In the aspects of censorship and freedom, it's not great. Definitely. This is bad. This is a bad thing. But I don't think it's immediately as terrifying as it sounds right off the bat, or as much as an aggressive attack as it seems. We are going through something similar in my state with books, of course, where a law was actually passed and is in place now as of last fall about librarians being criminalized for giving explicit materials to students. And that's already not legal. Like, an adult can't just give explicit things, depictions, graphic pictures to children. You can't. And so that law is something that already is covered by existing laws. They clearly intended it to be an attack on LGBTQ books, but specifically explicit images are already not allowed. So it's not really doing anything new or different. It is a scary trend that we obviously do not want to see more of expanding, and these attacks are continuing to grow. But for me, the thing that I want to get across on this topic is that I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful through all of this, that these things are happening out of people's fear of change, and that they are going to incite bigger pushback for our freedoms. We have seen that happen repeatedly, where governments who were allowed to sort of slide by because they weren't directly impacting or causing any negative things to occur in people's day-to-day lives, now they're having really overt effects on people, and only the vocal minority seem to be really supporting these bills and laws. And I think that sanity hopefully will win out, that people will be voted out of their roles because of their pushing these sort of crazy harebrained schemes. The person in charge in Tennessee who was very vocally backing this, admitted that he didn't even know what went on at Drag Queen Story Hours, but yet was pushing that this had to be in place to protect children from them, right? And so I do think that we are moving toward a place where that is a very vocal, loud minority, and it's sliding away. And this is sort of the attempt to grab onto power and maintain norms, to conserve the norms that they hope for as we're expanding into a more and more free society that's progressing beyond them, hopefully. So, in the same vein, as we are talking about progress, the next topic that I wanted to discuss is something that's been all over BookTube this week. And so I guess we'll start the recommendations with me pointing you to Brian from Bookish's channel, because this is about the Roald Dahl estate deciding to change the text of some of the books based on general public sentiments about things that are said in those books. And Brian managed to get his video out much more quickly than I did, because I really like to ruminate on things. But he grabbed onto, and is the only other person I've seen talk about this with the same kernel of truth that I was very focused on talking about. So I've been thinking about this for a week. He talked about it much more eloquently and widely. So I'm going to focus on that one aspect. And that is that this is largely a cash grab. So that aspect is, this is all about the estate of Roald Dahl, and specifically the UK publisher as well. So this was not anything planned by the US publisher or other regional publishers, as far as I'm aware. This was very limited to UK publishing. So the UK publisher and estate hired sensitivity readers to go through the works and make these decisions about what needed to be changed, what was inappropriate. And all of that is about remaining relevant in a changing market. If you don't know, I have worked in the technology area of financial market data for almost 20 years now. And for companies to remain relevant, they do have to follow consumer sentiments. They do have to look at trends and follow the tides a bit. And that's what I see happening here, where I'm seeing a lot of people feel alarm about this as censorship. Yes, it is censorship, but it's very much self-censorship and branding. And that's something that happens, I would imagine, probably hundreds of times a week at publishers. I don't see this as substantially different from something like what happened with Chick-fil-A recently. And I have not looked into this particular case at all, so this could be really wrong. But as far as I understand, Chick-fil-A announced a vegetarian sandwich, and there was a very small but vocal minority who kind of had some backlash about that. You know, we don't want no woke sandwiches, right? Was it wokeness pushing for vegetarian sandwiches, or offering to cancel Chick-fil-A for not having vegetarian sandwiches? No, that did not happen, as far as I'm aware. What happened is that Chick-fil-A are very savvy in their business acumen, and they saw a market share in vegetarian sandwiches that they wanted in on that is increasingly growing. And so they did the risk assessment. They saw those consumers that were going to vocally backlash and realized, okay, those are established customers. The amount of them we're going to lose out of this is probably near non-existent. We're going to get some vocal backlash. That's probably going to be PR, in fact. And then those people are going to come back because they do like our sandwiches. They're going to forget it and come back and buy again. But if we don't introduce a vegetarian sandwich, we're not going to be able to tap into this new consumer who wants a vegetarian sandwich that we don't currently serve. And that's what's going on here. They've done the risk assessment and are more interested in the new consumer. The Roald Dahl estate, we saw the same thing with the Dr. Seuss estate, where the estate and publisher hired sensitivity readers and decided they weren't going to be putting certain books on shelves from Dr. Seuss based on them having these sort of problematic elements. And what that's about is that the nostalgic reader is not a priority. You're not the target. They're interested in the new consumers. They're interested in the people who are coming into the store to buy a book, them flipping through and seeing something off-putting and either not buying the book at that point or buying it, taking it home and finding the off-putting thing and then not buying again. If you're the reader who already has nostalgia, you're already going to own those books. You're not a customer for them. You are probably going to read them to your kids or for yourself either way because you already have that existing nostalgia. Whereas a new customer is an untapped potential that they don't want to turn off and send away without buying their product. So all of this is, as I said, it's very much a cash grab, much more so than censorship. It's not about following what people are demanding of them. It's about following progress of society and social mores and what's acceptable to a new customer reader today. I also think this gets into some difficult territory because something we talk about here so much is separating art from artists and treating books as art. But what we're really talking about here is an author as a brand and a book as a product. And there's no way to separate those really, even in this case where the author is no longer around. The estate is a representative of the author. They have the right to make those authorial choices. Don't get me into sort of how gross that is, the author as a brand idea, the idea of intellectual property carrying on beyond the intellect that made them. It's gross and I hate it, but that's just me who, hates all of capitalism. And we're not going to change that instantly, though. So I don't see this as substantially different than branding decisions like the complete repackaging and remarketing of the A Court of Thorns and Roses series recently by Sarah J. Maas, where the publishers decided basically we're going to make more profit. We've already tapped into the YA market. We're going to rebrand this as adult and get this new market share from adult sales. So as I said up front, I think they're making a lot of choices about that happen in the background and aren't as obvious. My conclusion of all of this is that you really should be more mad at the late stage capitalist dystopia that we live in that has turned art into brands and products than you should be mad about censorship in this particular case. There definitely is censorship that goes on, and I think that we've seen a lot of cases where translated works get censored in markets that they're targeting without the author's knowledge, and those are pretty harmful cases that would be similar to this. But in this case, the people in control of the work, of the authorial intent, and of the branding of the author made it as a decision to self-censor. And so I think that's a lot less insidious than some other things that are going on in terms of damage to art. And that leads me into my next point, which is all about AI. That's another topic that has been really sweeping booktube, but I'm very behind on videos, but I have not noticed anybody actually bring this up or post videos specific to this particular topic, and that is Neil Clark from Clark's World magazine, which is a prominent sci-fi short fiction, I think they do nonfiction as well, but prominently sci-fi short fiction magazine had to stop submissions. They had to block submissions because this year, and more particularly this month, they have seen an exponential growth in AI submissions they've had to ban. And that sort of came out of nowhere and has flooded them this month. So I don't know what obviously like ChatGPT, that whole conversation has exploded this year. And I think the prominence of that is obviously the driver, but other than that, there isn't any clear reason why it's really ramped up. But it's such an interesting conversation because this is raising questions about how we value art from a human versus an AI, and what the AI market will do to human created art. And it also ties back to my conversation about late stage capitalism and how we are going to have to find a way to value art without it being a brand. This makes very imminent the idea that we're going to have to separate art from the sustainability or survivability of the artist. We're going to have to value human art over it being a product, because we're going to be glutted with AI art to where that could replace human art if we wanted it to. It could be cheaper. It could flood the market, as we've seen here, where Neil Clark is going to have to make difficult decisions about how to go forward with the magazine, because new artists are going to be blocked out potentially by certain moves that could be made to limit the AI. And that's going to be a difficult choice that we're going to increasingly face as this becomes more and more prominent. Now, obviously, you can tell I'm on the side of, separating incomes and a person's ability to survive from whatever work they do. But I think there are elements of AI and what's happening right now with rapid changes there that are going to substantially change the way that society and systems work. And I think there's a lot of potential for that upset to happen within the next 5 years even. Will we be able to change and adapt? I don't know. But I have to go back to kind of that first point surrounding these drag laws. I have to be hopeful and think that we are on the precipice of a great change, and the future that I see is a change that adapts to all of this, rather than turning into an even greater dystopia where we're all wage slaves to our AI overlords or something, I do think we are being pushed into something that is going to be a massive change for us in our world, and I hope it's a good one. So I will leave you with my couple recommendations, which are also short fiction related. This week, both Analog magazine and Asimov's, which are sci-fi speculative fiction, short fiction, poetry, and some nonfiction, I believe. They both published their Reader's Choice Awards for the past year, for 2022. So these are great to draw from for further award voting for the major awards. Hugo obviously is the big one that I'm interested in. But they have everything from, as I said, nonfiction, poetry, all the way up to novella length works that are free to read online, and they have been voted as the best from these particular magazines by their readers. So I really recommend checking out those lists. I'm going to be hoping to get into some of the novellas, because everyone is always trying to broaden the novella field for the Hugos, and I'm really interested to do that. So I will be digging into some of those. I have not read any of them yet, unfortunately. That is it for my ramble this week. It was a long one. Thank you if you stuck through all of this. Let me know your thoughts on these topics down below. If you also feel we're in for a hopeful future change, or if you have more dire warnings for me to look out for. I'm always interested in these topics. So please let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
Yes, and he was also country.
I have always been bothered by this gap between the mirror and the sink. I just finally installed a little easy preset backsplash thing. I think that definitely improves it a little bit.